Megtooth Sabers requires a lot of work on engineering, drilling, smoothing, tapping, setting, imagining, cutting, stripping, twisting, dipping, tin it, pin it, wire it, fire it, lock it, cast it, swing it, bash it. Megtooth Sabers.
Greetings, Saber fans. Had to give you a little bit of Nihilus action there. Gotta love this thing since she's back in action. Saber's so sick, man. Battle mode, Profi Nihilus. Thing's awesome. At any rate, take that blade out of there and put in the blade plug back in. It's good to see everybody. I see Max, Ken, Joe 6. Hey, what's going on? See who else we got in here. Smooth Jazz family. Sarmiento's here. But at any rate, greetings everybody. Good to see everyone. And, you know, Max, I saw your comments there at the beginning. Listen, man, I went and got this as soon as you wrote that. This was my first Saber. This was a TCSS Saber. Initially, I installed it with Spark, and it was in-hilt LED, and it's too long, and I made it to include a crystal chamber because I really wanted a crystal chamber, and the bottom line was this was in-hilt LED. It was way too complicated for my first Saber. Now, I learned a lot when I did it. So there were a lot of frustrations along the way when I built this Saber. There's a lot of things that I wish I'd have done differently now, but I mean, you know, this Saber's 4 or 5 years old. But, you know, there's a lot of things I would have done differently. As a matter of fact, I went back and reinstalled this Saber with Igniter. This was the first NeoPixel lightsaber I ever made, and it was powered by Igniter. It still works, but I made a lot of mistakes on this Saber, and this Saber was a kind of a cut my teeth Saber, because I've reinstalled this thing, I don't know, 3 times. First 2 times was in-hilt LEDs. The first time it didn't work. The second time it did. And then NeoPixels came along and I decided I wanted to make this NeoPixel. And I turned this into a NeoPixel lightsaber. Hey, Jared. So don't get frustrated, Max, because, you know, failures are all part of the learning process. That's how we learn. That's how we get things done. That's how we progress. But at any rate, I got a big project to show you all tonight. So this was mega in the works for me for a long time. I've had this Hilton chassis for a long time. I still have to put the grips and the D-ring on it. I'll show what I'm going to do there in a bit. But this is a TGS Graflex, of course. And I have it in a New Hope configuration. The bubble strips are on there. The glass eye is on there. But the big to-do on this one is not the outside. It's the inside. So that is the chassis. And the cool part about it is there is the on switch right there. I'm gonna... There's the red blinkies going. I don't know if you can see that because the light might be drowning it out. You can see the crystal chamber going. Now there's a bunch of LEDs in the crystal chamber. Oop. Put it in the volume menu. This thing is beautiful. Now here's the cool part about this chassis. Well, number one, I'll turn it on. Of course, it's battle mode. You see that's a Dark Side Engineering blade plug by Arkham, and actually Arkham built that blade plug. That's one of his. And you know, of course, gesture ignitions and retractions. Now, let's go to the cool part about this Saber. So I'm going to undo the red button, swing it off to the side, undo the glass eye, and once you undo the glass eye, out comes the chassis. So there she is. Oops. Oh, my blade plug. My blade plug fell out. So there's the chassis going in all of its glory. And you can see that I've got two LEDs in here flashing blue. They're here, and they're flashing blue. I don't know if you can see it, but they're at a different tempo than the rest of it. Now, I don't have the chassis LEDs running yet. Eventually there'll be neopixels going in this screen. We'll talk about that in a second. And the Profi's already set up for that. I just haven't activated them yet. And I'll talk about why in a second. But at any rate, I wanted y'all to see this thing. It's pretty wild. The
An elegant weapon for a more civilized age.
Kylo failed you. I won't.
Kylo Ren.
Look at that craziness. Oh, dang it, hit the volume menu. So now my blue LEDs in there interfere. I don't know if you guys can see the blue LEDs in there, but they interfere with stuff that's not a blue blade. So I'm going to have to deactivate those. But you know, there's a fire blade, a pulsing fire blade in the crystal chamber. That's pretty wild. Went off.
You do have a great many things to explain.
So I'd still got to adjust those blues, and then
Hello there.
this is the battery meter, and I have it running in the stock connectors. That's why I run them independent. But that's the battery level meter, and then I've got this blinking at a different pace in the when it's in battery meter. This blinks fast, and those blue LEDs that are in the crystal chamber, I'm going to try to rotate it where you can see them. See the blue LEDs blinking really fast in the crystal chamber? So I've got different blink sequences set up for when this is in the battery mode. And then back to the first font, the original font.
This is the weapon of a Jedi Knight.
But at any rate, it turned out freaking phenomenal. But I wanted everybody to see that. This is basically my most complex build to date. And, you know, for those of y'all that don't know, Goth 3D, Cedric, Darth Rio, Rick Rio, he goes by a lot of different names. It depends on whether you're on the forums or Facebook or what. He engineered this chassis, and I had a lot of issues with it, mainly because of things that I was trying to do to it to personalize it. But the engineering behind this is pretty incredible. But it was not an easy build. It was, you know, fairly complex. So I'm going to put the lightsaber back in there. And once I get it lined up, I'm going to put the glass eye back in. But she is definitely beautiful. And then I'm going to put the red button back on. And then you can see the saber. There you go. It's really loud too without the back end on it. But I'm going to put the back end on it and let it go into deep sleep because we got some more to talk about tonight. But, you know, I definitely wanted to show you guys that thing. But, guys, I've had the parts for this for a long time. And I bought the parts slowly over a long period of time. This is a very expensive lightsaber. Probably the most expensive one I've ever built out. I've never taken a commission for one of these full metal chassis. And the reason is because I had never built a full metal chassis. Outside of for the Graflex 2.0 kits, the master chassis, which is just the back end. But having a full metal removable chassis, you know, the complex ones like the Martin Byers and the Goth Master chassis and the Goth Mentor chassis, I hadn't built, which I'm going to talk about something again in a minute about the motors inside the chassis, because there was a question about that on open source, and there might be a viewer on tonight that's waiting for me to answer that question, and I'm going to talk about that. But there was a lot of, you know, if any of y'all watch Benji Graham's videos, the Nerf Herder Customs, Benji Graham talked about, you know, never experiment on a customer's hilt. Never take something that's unknown for a first time for a customer. And I had a lot of requests for me to do mentors and master chassis and Martin Byers, and typically I've turned those commissions down because I haven't done those chassis. But now I'd be comfortable with taking on a mentor chassis, although it would cost a lot of money. But I'd be comfortable with it. But I try to, you know, build every model of Saber that I possibly can, so that if somebody sends me something, you know, hopefully I can work with it and I can fix it. And sometimes I go a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but you know, I try to remain in my comfort zone. So building that Graflex Saber was a big part of getting outside of my comfort zone. And you know, the big thing remaining on it are the grips. So I have to attach the grips, and I also have to attach the D-ring, and I got a double rivet D-ring, and the D-ring will go, you know, on the back right around there. So once I get that done, the Saber is done. She's finito. And you know, I don't really have that much left to do when you look at it that way. But I want to get into last week. We talked about, and I want to show it kind of up close so you guys can see this monstrosity up close. Jeff Birch would be having a cow right now. But this is the actual test rig for that Graflex Mentor that I built. And basically I ran a bunch of NeoPixel female plugs, so never throw these female plugs away because you can reuse them for this kind of stuff. And basically I was testing my config and all the blades. And there you can see that PhysiCom Bluetooth thing that still ain't working, but that was my test rig, and it looks like a monstrosity because it is, but I was just trying to quick and dirty test that the blade styles and the config was going to work the way I had it written, you know, before I wired up the Profi in that Graflex. Now that Profi in there is one of the red ones from Electronics 123, and that Profi Mentor Graflex is a big solid. You're number one to SoCal Sabers and Jordan Eugene. You know, I finally got my red Profi, and it won from SoCal Sabers. So the red Profi's running that Graflex is kind of a spiteful message of, you know, you may have ripped us all off of a bunch of money, but I still got my red Profi, and it's powering that Graflex, and it came from Electronics 123. But at any rate, since we're talking about development boards, I do a lot of testing. Probably to the point where y'all think I'm anal. If you've watched my blade building video, my data line came off my prison rig. But if you've watched my building a blade video, this is the test board that I used in that video. And basically it's a Prism 5.5. I've got two buttons on it. I have a negative NeoPixel connector, and that NeoPixel connector is attached to negative on the FETs here and there, so it's attached to two FETs. Can't see it because all the hot goo. And then I have, and the hot goo is because I move this around a lot. The data line is usually connected to data, and I did put an onboard resistor on the data line, and although I don't know you're going to be able to see that. So I've got to resolder that data. And then the positive line goes down here to positive, where I have a positive pigtail. There's my negative pigtail to attach the battery negative, and of course a speaker so I can hear what it's doing. I build these test rigs to test NeoPixels, to test blades, the Profi, the Profi disasters that I build. And here's another one. So like I'll take boards that have fried amps or whatever and use them as experiments. This particular board, this is what I tested the Profi Blaster OS on. And also a couple months ago we did an RGB common anode LED video, and this is the board that I used to show how we experimented with that video. But a lot of times before I put stuff into a Saber, I'll build them out on my workbench, prototype them up. And speaking of prototyping them up, I'm going to show you something else that came in handy. This was a project we built on one of my live videos, a few months ago to give everybody. Oh yeah, I know it does. It came out beautiful, but I'm really proud of that Saber. I can't wait to finish it up and put it on Graflex Addict support group. Oops, sorry there, everybody. I kicked the tripod. But at any rate, and I'm trying a new setup with the computer down lower, so I'm not like looking to the side. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm making eye contact with y'all instead of looking to the side. But we did this prototyping board on one of my live videos. We showed you how to wire this thing up, and it's basically soldering practice, where you can get practice at soldering resistors, switches, and this common anode LED, and kind of learn how circuits work. And the cool part about this, let me show you. I get my test battery out. The cool part about this little project that we made is I actually use it all the time. And at the time I made it, I'm like, I guess that thing's just going to be junk that'll be laying around. And actually it hasn't been. So like when I'm testing diffusion, it's a breadboard. It's a breadboard. Ooh, don't touch the, I'm just going to touch the contacts together there. So it's a breadboard with a common anode RGB LED on there, and you can mess around with mixing colors. Like there's blue and green is a cyan, blue and red is purple. So it's basically cool because it's just a little experiment thing. But the use I've found for this little breadboard that we made is that using this common anode RGB LED and these three switches, I can put pieces of chassis over this LED and kind of get a vision about how my chassis diffusion's doing for my NeoPixels. And that's worked great on this Mentor because I had a lot of accent LEDs to diffuse. And the bad part that I couldn't show you guys tonight is the auxiliary blades that are going to be in the back of the chassis. Let me take that off again and show you the back of the chassis. So here in these windows here, there's going to be LEDs going. They're not in there yet. And also in these holes in the front, there's going to be LEDs going. And I've added diffusion in here so that once I do get the NeoPixel strips wired up in here, that I'll know what they look like, because I actually put my diffusion under this breadboard to see how it looked under the light of the common anode RGB LED. And I didn't even show you all the battery swap on this thing. I'll show you all that in a minute. But prototyping and building these prototype boards and building the experimental soundboards are an important part of Saber building, especially when you're new Max. To build something on your workbench and make sure everything functions and make sure you understand how all the wires have to flow helps you kind of, oh yeah, I'll take that thing totally out here in a minute, Enoch Root, since you didn't get to see it. But it's definitely at the beginning of the video. I took the whole chassis out and showed the whole chassis. But yeah, it's definitely a beautiful chassis, that's for sure. Rick Rio did such a great job on that thing. It's just beautiful. And it's gimmicky. So like it's got a switch on here, and I can turn the Saber off with that switch, and now the Saber's off, and then I can slide the speaker pod back. See that speaker pod slide back? And then I take the battery cover off. I meant to show this earlier, I didn't. And then the battery actually, oops, didn't mean to do that. The battery actually comes out. So some of this is not solid on there yet. There's the battery, and the connectors for the battery are here. So it's crazy. But you know, then you can just slide in a new battery. But I wanted to show y'all something else here. So I haven't built this for it yet, but this is the charging thing for the battery, and Darth Rio is sending me all the charging hardware that I need, which will be installed in here. And then this will have positive pins inside of here that are connected to the USB charger, and then the battery actually slides into this to recharge, and then you plug in your USB here, and you have an indicator LED here that lets you know what's the charging state. So, you know, the whole Mentor deal is kind of cool with all this stuff that Rick Rio has done with it. But, you know, the battery goes onto that piece right there, and then you just take the Mentor, and what you do is you just put the battery back in and slide her back home. So there the battery slid back home. Now I'm going to put in my accent piece, and then that's it. She's all back together. So it's pretty easy to change out the battery pods, but I have to, oh yeah, but I still have to build the battery charging pod. So until I get this built, and of course I'll paint all this so it looks really hot, but you plug in USB there, and the battery pod plugs right into the charging adapter, which is pretty cool. So, you know, a lot of the things that I'll talk about is one of the difficulties on building this Saber is how to plug in to program it. So this is one of my L-shaped programming cords that I use. I don't know if y'all can see that, but it's a USB-C 90-degree programming port. And the chassis, where this has to go in, I had to actually file all this down so this fit into the chassis so I could program. So there's just so much that went into this Saber that it was just crazy. It was a lot of work. It was a lot more work than I anticipated. But at any rate, I'm proud of it. It's done. But I think the big thing tonight, because I know Max is a little depressed right now. Max is building his first Saber, and you know, he said a bunch of stuff's gone wrong, and you know, that's just Saber building, Max. Don't get frustrated. The first time that let me tell you something. There ain't no way on God's green earth that I would have built this as my first Saber. If I would have built this as my first Saber, I would have been going crazy, because this is just, it's an advanced build. If you don't have a good fundamental understanding of circuitry, wiring, wire routing, prototyping, if you don't understand all that, that build would have been impossible. Somebody would have bought all those parts and tried to build it on their own as a first build. I think that's a huge mistake. You know, I think what you've got to do on your first build is simplify. You know, simplify down to a basic lightsaber with a basic chassis, even in-hilt LEDs. And once you get in-hilt LEDs up and running, and you're like, okay, I made that work, then go to NeoPixel. Now, NeoPixels aren't, I think NeoPixels are in a way simpler than in-hilt LEDs for wiring the LED module. But where, you know, NeoPixel sabers are more complicated is when you get into building the blades. Building the blades is really tough. Yeah, I mean, I melted 3 Teensy Saber V3s. I've burnt a ton of sound cards. That's the ugly part of Saber building that a lot of these guys don't talk about. I mean, even the best of the best. You know, the other week, Mike Perez, which, by the way, Mike, if you sign on or you're watching this, and didn't ship your Saber out yet because I did some repainting on your chassis, and I was waiting for that paint to dry before I put the lower on it. But, you know, that Saber came back to me, and it came back for a speaker replacement. I replaced the speaker and sent it back, and he sent it back. It was having the same problems, and then I got to messing around with it, took that speaker off, put the speaker on my prototype board, and the speaker was fine. And then I put some brand new speakers on there, and they were doing the same thing. And the voltage splitter on that board was causing problems. It wasn't reading the voltage right. And so I just replaced the soundboard. Now, the customer didn't pay for that. I did. And, was it Profi defective when I got it? I don't know. Was it something I did that burnt it? I don't know. But, when you're building lightsabers, you're going to burn boards, you're going to overheat, a point, you're going to melt off contacts. I mean, I've done all kinds of crazy crap on these soundboards when I was learning. That's all part of the process. But I'm pretty sure that, that Profi might have been bad on receipt. That was the only one I've ever got that was, that didn't work and had malfunctions like that. And I've done a million of those night chassis Graflexes, so I didn't do anything different in that Saber than I've done on any of the rest of them. So, it was probably a bad board. So you're going to have hiccups and bumps along the road, but I think a lot of times, people want to get into lightsaber building and they want every feature that you can possibly have. They want OLED screens, Bluetooth control, crystal chambers, stock connectors, and I just think if you start out trying to build a Saber like that, you're making a big mistake. I think you need to start off simple. Start off on the ground floor and work your way up. That Graflex Mentor build is a challenging build for me, and I've been building Sabers now for over 4 years, and I've been doing electronics and soldering work since I was 13 or 14 years old. So that build was tough. I'm not going to lie, and there's still some things that if I did another one that I would improve on. That chassis certainly has some intricacies and some quirks that you have to work through and work around, especially depending on what kind of metals you printed in. And it was a lot of work. It was a lot of stress. And then your wire management, wire management on that chassis was difficult, especially with what I wanted to accomplish with it. But there was a question on open source Sabers about how to wire a motor and make it work off Profi. And so I'm going to order one of these motors that spins the crystal chamber and do some experimentation in the coming weeks. Yeah, it happens, Mountain Sabers. It's happened to all of us. But, that's just part of Saber building. You chuck it and move on. I mean, I've got a board heaven over here, man. And some of these mistakes were self-imposed and some of them weren't. I mean, there's, 3 boards that are fried right there. Teensy Saber and 2 Profi 1.5s. And this one, the evidence of its frying is still on the board. Let me get my finger off it so it's not in the shade. You can see where it short-circuited there. And that was self-imposed. It was a mistake that I made. But certainly, all of us have our little board heavens, and then I'll keep those boards and use them for. Hey, True 1777. Hey, look, I did some more touch-up paint on your hilt. It's right over here, and I didn't put the bottom on the hilt yet because the paint was drying. But we'll get that Saber off in the mail. Hopefully, I can package it up tonight after the live video. But definitely wanted, and by the way, True 1777, he's the one that had the Saber with the defective soundboard that I was just talking about when Max was talking about his frustrations. And I'm like, sometimes that just happens. You just move on. I think that soundboard in his Saber was defective from receipt. But I certainly didn't want him to have a Saber with a defective soundboard in it. The chassis, Mike. And I think I did a lot of work on the hilt that I didn't even tell you about. But the inside of that hilt had like an extra layer of chrome on it, and it was thick. You could feel it with your finger on the bottom of the hilt, and it was rubbing the chassis. So I did a lot of work on the bottom of your hilt where it goes onto the Saber, because that extra layer of chrome was rubbing the chassis really bad, and that's what was making that squeak. It's the only Graflex I've ever had that did that. And sure enough, They did have an extra layer of chrome in there that was screwing it all up, so I got rid of it. So your Saber should definitely screw together a lot better, Mike, when you get it back. And tried to fix the paint job as best I could. I think it looks good. I'm going to stop where I'm at because I've spent a lot of hours on that. But I was just trying to make it better than it was when you got it the first time, Mike. But at any rate, you know, you gotta start at the bottom, Max. You gotta build something simple that works to build your confidence. You know, get a Nano Biscotti, get a Spark soundboard, get something simple, and you know, build a basic Saber, something very basic. You know, gut an Ultra Sabers, and you know, put you an MHS V6 chassis in there and make it happen. You don't have to build you know, a high dollar Saber right off the bat. Oh, I said I was going to take off that Mentor chassis again and show you guys, so I'll show it again really quick so everybody can see it. But this is certainly not something that I would have done as a beginner. I would not have built this chassis as a beginner. There's no way on God's green earth. I'm going to turn this, I'm going to throw this switch on.
An elegant weapon, but a more civilized age.
So, you know, a lot of guys are like, hey, can you build me a lightsaber? How much would it cost? Like, can you build me a Graflex? And then they're like, you know, I want a full metal chassis like this because they've seen these on the internet. And I'm like, yeah. I might have a Nano I can send you, Max. I might have a Prism I can send you. I mean, I have a bunch of soundboards that I'm not going to use anymore. You and I can talk offline about that later. But I think building a simple Saber is the way to go. But yeah, there's the chassis on that thing.
Hello there.
Kylo failed you. I won't.
Kylo Ren.
That's a pulsing fire blade, and that's crazy.
Lord Vader. Hello there.
There's my battery meter. And the red LEDs are blinking here. And the
This is the weapon of a Jedi.
But anyway, this thing has battle mode now. Thing's freaking awesome. So, of course, it has a Solos Hold brass blade holder. This is rhodium switch cover. And I'm going to do rhodium accents here. I'll have to order those. Those I did in gold steel, but they look like crap. The beginning and end of the crystal chamber I did in gold steel, and the crystal chamber and everything else was in rhodium. And then, of course, all the back was brass. And I did the rear end in gold steel, but I polished the gold off it and turned it into silver steel. But I'm going to order a 28 millimeter speaker when there. Because this one just has the flat premium speaker in there, which really doesn't sound that bad, surprisingly. It's actually loud, and also I did the copper mesh cover over the back of the speaker here. Otherwise, the speaker's just exposed. I mean, I've done a lot of work. Oh, so I was talking about the accent LEDs that I haven't put in here yet, and I was watching a video, and I know that Ethan Zimmer has gotten a bad rap throughout the community for whatever reasons, but I still think Ethan has a lot of genius in a lot of the work that he does, and Ethan used these 2020 neopixels, which are denser. You get 300 per meter, and I ordered some 2020 neopixel strips off of I don't know, one of them China sites, and that's why I haven't wired the NeoPixel accents in that yet. I'm waiting on those 2020s. A lot, Enoch Root. A lot. If I had it to do all over again, I would probably do this piece and this piece that attached to the blade holder in brass, And, you know, I do like the crystal chamber in all rhodium, but I would have printed the back piece that doesn't have any crystal chamber holders probably in brass. It would have been cheaper. I did it all in rhodium. It's shiny. It's definitely shiny. It's definitely a pretty chassis. It's awesome. With the Solos Hold Supreme blade holder in brass, it's incredible. That's a great chassis. That's a great solution. It looks great. But what I was talking about was some of the stuff you guys see me showing. This isn't where I started. I didn't start with a Graflex Mentor chassis. You know, I started on an N-Hilt LED Saber, and you have to start down there. But we're talking about the motors. So there was a question on open source Sabers. It's like ADHD theater on Megtooth Monday Live. We're talking about open source Sabers. We're talking about those motors and how to wire them and make them run. So most electric motors, the more voltage you throw at them, the faster they'll spin, and the less voltage you throw at them, the slower they'll spin. So the question was on the open source group, well, how do I wire a motor so it has different speeds? So when it's in idle, it goes slower. When it's on, it goes faster. And when it goes in lockup, it does some screwy stuff. Now, I've been thinking about this for a long time, because eventually I know I'm going to build a Saber with a motor that turns the accents in the crystal chamber. So I'm going to go ahead and order one of those motors, and we're going to wire it like an LED on one of the FETs, because if you make it a blade, if you make the electricity supply to it as a blade, you should technically be able to control the voltage to that blade, much like I did on this. So these LEDs, these red flashing LEDs here on the side, those are a blade. And there's additional blue LEDs, which I don't know if you can see them, but they're lighting up the crystal chamber. There's one right here. It's not lighting up the crystal, it's lighting up the crystal chamber. Those are blue LEDs. Now those are blades too. That's why, you know, even when it pulses off, the crystal chamber is still illuminated blue. I don't know if you guys can see that, if that turns out on camera. In person, it's very vivid. But yeah, so those are normal LEDs that I wired on a FET. So if I can make those normal LEDs dim and increase in brightness, that means that I'm actually controlling the voltage, but I'm controlling the voltage with a blade style. So the theory is, now Ethan Zimmer is the only one that I know that's done it. You know, along with the 2020 LEDs, I think that's what got me on Ethan Zimmer. But he also did a Graflex chassis that had the electric motor, and the motor had different effects depending on what the Saber was doing. If you program the motor as a blade and you attach the negative to one of the FETs, theoretically, you should be able to control the voltage to the Saber and get that motor to behave differently when it's in idle versus when it's on, and you could probably even get it to do weird lockup and blast effects. But blast is so quick, I don't think you would notice the changes in the spinning. But lockup, you know, you could get it to alternate between off and whatever color you programmed it as an LED, and that way it would get like really erratic in its spinning when it's in lockup. And then when it's in idle, you could give it like a really low voltage so it was just barely turning. And how you would do that would be to adjust the RGB values. So on the off behavior, you would program it as RGB. Let's say if you programmed it as a blue LED, and remember your color orders in those RGB colors are red, green, blue. So if you programmed it as a blue LED on the FETs and in your blade array in your config file, and if you put a blade style with off behavior and you put the RGB value as, you know, 0, 50, 0, or 0, 0, 50 red, green, blue, then, you know, it would only be operating at 50 milliamps, I think it is. instead of 255, which is your full range. And you would have to adjust that number until that crystal chamber was spinning as slow as you wanted it to an idle. But then when it was on, you would give that color full voltage so that the crystal chamber would spin at full speed. Ethan Zimmer has done that. He had a video about it. He didn't show how he did it, but I'm imagining that's how he did it. And there was a question on the open source group about how do you wire a motor for a crystal chamber. Well, you could wire it to your power, and as long as you had power on, it would spin. But I think if you wired it as a blade, you would kind of get more of the behavior that you want. So I'm going to go ahead and order one of those motors so we can experiment with it on the bench. Because before I do anything in a Saber, you know, I prototype it on the bench. Hey, Chet Osborne, great to see you. You made it. We're live. But I think it's important to bench test that type of stuff before you put it into a lightsaber to make sure that your theory is going to work out. You know, some DC motors, when you throw juice to them, they're on, they're spinning, they're going. Some will, you know, reduce RPMs as you reduce their voltage. So I guess we'll see when I get that motor in here whether or not my theory works. And if it does, then, you know, I could write something up and maybe, you know, Dimitri can put it on the Profi board manual. Because right now there's really not, and the same would hold true for a rumble motor. Although with bass speakers, I don't see the need for a rumble motor. I think rumble motors are stupid. You're going to have rumble motor induced clashes, and you're going to have to jack up your clash thresholds, which, you know, I hate when the clash threshold is too high. It's just no good. But at any rate, you know, for those of y'all that didn't see it, I'll show the battery change on this sucker again. Of course, the rear of the speaker pulls out like that, and then the battery cover comes off, and then you disconnect power, and then you slide the battery out like that. So that's the battery. And then the battery, this is another 3D part that you can get from Shapeways, but this will have the charger hardware in it. So the charger hardware goes inside the lid here, and then the charging receptacle actually has 2 male pins, and there's 2 female pins in the battery here and here. And so the battery will slide in here onto those male pins, and you plug it into your USB. And hang on a second, I'll show you where the USB goes. I'm going to put it back in. So the USB will be sticking out right there. And then on the other side, you have a charging indicator LED that will be there. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. You're welcome, Dev. I hope that worked out for you on the blaster. You know, there's only a couple Profi blasters out there, Scott. So if yours worked out, you're number 3 that I know of that's in an actual blaster. Of course, the guy that wrote the blaster code on TRA, which is God, I can't remember his screen name right now. Having an Alzheimer's moment, having a senior moment. He actually wrote Truth Crystal too. Deodad Josen. Deodad Josen wrote the code for the Profi blaster. Now he actually put the code into a lightsaber and was using his lightsaber like a blaster. But as far as blasters go, you had me, and there was Cloud Feather did one, and you. So there's only 3 Profi. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Yep. Yeah, he's the one that wrote the code for the Profi blaster, Deodad Josen. He's not really on TRA that much anymore. He helped design, in fact, he did design the current 7 Chambers Hero offering that's out there, the Ultimate Hero that 7 Chambers is doing right now. Deodad Josen actually designed that hilt. But he's really prevalent on the replica prop forum. And, he's an awesome dude. He's great at coding. I hate that he left the TRA. I had talked about that offline. I'm not going to go into why. I know why. But, I told him to check in on Profi's subforum anyway. I know why he left. And, I'm just not going to go into that here tonight. There's enough drama in the world. We don't need to add more. Yeah, I'd love to see him, Scott. You need to post them and send me a link. Yeah, there's Mom of All Heroes. Deodad Josen actually designed that hilt. So the guy that designed that hilt is actually the one that wrote the code for the Profi blasters. So there's more than just Frederick and Fernando and Matt McGreary and Dimitri Stock doing this stuff. You got guys like him too. So there's tons of people behind the scenes that are writing all kinds of great code. Yep. Just let me know, Scott. But, I kind of covered everything I wanted to cover tonight. And, y'all got to see the Mentor Graflex, which this thing's awesome. I'll put the battery, if I don't throw the battery across the room, which is not good for a lithium ion battery. But the battery pack is pretty cool. How Goth engineered this is great. And when I was first reading the directions for this, I was like, man, that's crazy. How am I going to get all that to work? And it does. So anyway, the battery, it just goes right into this receptacle right there like that. And then it slides down on the pin. And the male pin actually goes into the socket and the female pin doesn't. So what pushes the female pin in is this switch. So when you push this switch up on the negative side, that's what connects the negative side to the battery. So that's your on-off switch, but it actually connects the hilt to the battery. So that's pretty cool. But then I'm going to put the battery cover back on. There's the battery cover. And then, eventually this will get glued on, but I haven't glued it on yet. And this is the speaker housing, which goes there. But that's it. That's the Mentor chassis. So there's the main switch right there. I don't know if y'all can see that. It's a low profile brass switch underneath the switch cover. And then there's the auxiliary switch, which is a slide switch.
Hello there.
I need someone.
Kylo Ren. An elegant weapon for a more civilized age. An elegant weapon for a more civilized age. An elegant weapon for a more civilized age.
It's just awesome, Saber. But, this thing is definitely awesome. Definitely proud of this Saber. It was a big build. I'm going to set it off to the side. Hopefully I can finish the bottom of the hilt, and get the grips all on here, and get the D-ring mounted on there. Thing's going to be awesome. Oh yeah, that thing is super awesome. That thing is super awesome. That's the coolest chassis that I've ever built. I'm so proud of this Saber. I'll be glad when it's built. Which gets me into the last subject for tonight, which was let me put this back into the hilt. The last subject that I wanted to get into tonight is basically, I hadn't taken on any commissions. Mainly while I was fixing my old house and getting it ready to sell, and selling my old house. And it's been a while since I've taken on any commissions. No, Eric, on the Star Killer, I'm waiting on Hobby Lobby to restock the Rust Effects kit, and they haven't restocked it. In fact, when I had to go play bagpipes for a police officer that was killed in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, last week, And I don't know if y'all know this, but I play bagpipes as well. I lead our police bagpipe band. And while I was down there in Myrtle Beach, I went to Hobby Lobby and looked for that Artifacts kit, the Rust Effects kit, and they didn't have it. So that Rust Effects kit's holding up 2 Sabers right now, so just bear with me. I mean, as soon as I get that Rust Effects kit, then I can finish that hilt and get my other Star Killer done, and then we're in business. I am not going to leave it polished rod. I'm going to do some weathering on it. Just haven't had a chance to get to the weathering yet. But yeah, I'm going to give it some weathering, because the weathering will bring out the details in the brass. So the recessed areas will all be weathered. You know, in the brass will all be weathered. And then I'll polish out the high surfaces, which will give contrast in the brass, so it'll look better. But you know, that's pretty awesome saber. Yeah, too busy. Jenru knows. You know, I've been playing bagpipes for 21 years. I teach bagpipes, and it's, you know, between bagpipes and work and lightsabers and everything else, definitely stay pretty busy. But so going forward, since I'm going to be taking commissions, I would much rather do commissions for, you know, people that are regular viewers on the Megtooth Mondays. And I don't think I'm going to do the lottery list anymore. I think I'm going to do you know, my regular YouTube subscribers and viewers and people that interact with me on YouTube and Facebook, versus just people that message me out of the blue or email me out of the blue. Oh yeah, I meant to show you guys that. So my son, Caleb, he got this for me for Christmas. And it is my dog. That's actually my dog, Risky. That's actually him. And and it's Kylo Ren. It's Risky Ren. Isn't that awesome? So my son got that for me. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, Smooth Jazz Family, you'd be on the top of that list. You know, especially since you and I have already worked together, you'd be at the top of that list. But I got to do a new intro video for the YouTube channel and for Facebook. And, you know, hopefully we'll be starting to take commissions soon. You know, I told myself that after we sold the old house that I wouldn't take any more commissions until I finished this Graflex, because this thing was sitting in a box for 1.5 years. And, you know, I very seldom build projects for myself. And, you know, I pretty much have all the lightsabers I need. You all know I love Graflex. But I went ahead and built that one, which was really complicated. I'm going to do one of the KROR cross guards. I'm definitely going to build one of those out. And, you know, one of the steps I had to do that one was the Phoenix Prop 7-chamber Star Killer and the heat treating the emitter. And to make sure that I had the heat treatment down so that when I did the dibs on April. You got it, Cole. I owe Cole one big time, and Cole knows what I'm talking about. I'm going to have to build Cole a saber pretty much totally free of charge. Cole did me a big favor, which I'll keep that to myself. But I owe Cole huge. But I can build that crossguard out no problem. It's a lot simpler than that Mentor Graflex. But the Mentor Graflex, I knew I needed to set aside about a month. And certainly I pretty much been building on that Mentor Graflex since I finished the Princess Saber that Ella got for Christmas. Yeah. I'll tell you what, I'll let that one go for... Yeah, I know, I don't have a Patreon yet. I need to set that up. I'd be willing to let that Graflex go for $3,000. Ain't no way I'm letting that thing go. Been sitting over there. Yeah, that one's actually a Mentor a Metal Mentor by Goth 3D Designs. But yeah, I just kind of was gonna, yeah, one small car, Darth. Yeah, that's an expensive chassis. Just the chassis components in that were expensive, and the electronics that are in it and all the labor that was involved in making it happen. That was an expensive Saber. It's amazing, sourcing all those parts to make that Graflex accurate, including that chassis. It was expensive, and I think it's twice as expensive now as it was when I bought the chassis, because Shapeways went up on their metal prices. Yeah, $3 or $4 grand is what that Saber would go for. That's for sure. Especially once I finish everything I'm going to do to it. It's not completely done yet. I do have those accent LEDs, the 2020 NeoPixels. Has anybody else done any work with the 2020 NeoPixels mountain sabers? So instead of it being 35 millimeters by 35 millimeters, they're 20 by 20, and you get 300 pixels per meter as opposed to 144. That's 300 pixels per meter. So twice the density on the 2020 pixels. So 2020 pixels are gonna go in that hilt. That's gonna be awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely keeping that hilt. That one's basically gonna be the flagship or pride of my collection. I don't keep a whole lot of sabers. I have a TFA Graflex and ESB Graflex, and now that A New Hope Graflex. And I don't think I'm gonna do a Broke Flex, the Rise of Skywalker Flex. Oh yeah, I love building sabers. There was a guy that lived here in Wilmington close to me, and he was having a problem with his Profi saber, and he brought it here, and we worked on it one day and did all kinds of improvement to it, and he left, and he's off to the races. There's no way I'm selling that saber. Darth Vader. Trying to get caught up on y'all's comments because y'all are going fast. I will eventually set up a Patreon, and also I do have a merchandise page, but I was ordering test articles to make sure that they all worked out good, and I'll show that to y'all sometime. But the test articles that I ordered all came out good, so I may put up some merch pages and stuff here in a bit, and if y'all buy some merch, and every now and then people throw a super chat out, which y'all don't have to, but when people do, that helps me order stuff like I'm going to do for this motor. If we're going to figure out how to make Profi run these motors, let's order one and let's do it on my bench, and we'll do it on a Monday Megtooth live video, and hopefully that helps more people out that may have a motor crystal chamber chassis planned. So that's the way it works. You guys are helping me, and I don't collect the hilts. So that's one good thing about me, Enoch Root, is I'm not really a huge collector. I love the Graflex and I love the Crossguard. And outside of that, and my MHS sabers that I built, like my Nihilus, that's pretty much it. This was MHS, and I miss building MHS sabers because you can kind of do whatever you want. And this saber was a lot of work. Yeah, when I get the 2020s in mountain sabers, I'm definitely going to do a video about them. The funny thing is, I saw Ethan Zimmer. I still watch Ethan Zimmer's channel because Ethan does have some innovative, creative stuff he does inside of his sabers. I know, for whatever reason, some people don't like him or don't like his work, but certainly I will say this about Ethan. He definitely is innovative. He finds new ways and cool ways of doing stuff. Oh, Birchie's on. Hey, Birch. But, Zimmer's found some creative ways to do stuff. And the 2020 NeoPixels are something that I'm excited about. I should have them by the end of January. And when I get them, I'm going to go ahead and put them in that chassis so that, hey, Birch, I finished my Mentor Graflex. I wanted to show it to you really quick. I'm showing it off to everybody. I'm taking this hilt apart 20 times tonight. But I got my Mentor Graflex done, and I'm going to slide that chassis out of there. Look at that thing, Birch. Look at that. Isn't that crazy?
This is the weapon of a Jedi Knight.
That thing's on fire. It's in fuego. Auto blast. Anyway, that thing is on fuego, man. You see the red LEDs going here. We're going to have all kind of accent neopixels going here, which is what we were just talking about, Jeff. I'm going to be firing the 2020 neopixels in that chassis when they come in. Megtooth workout shorts. Yeah, everybody nerd up. Megtooth sweatpants. I think they actually have some of that stuff in the store. Oh, man. But, yeah, I'm caught up. And, you know, I'm fixing to take on commissions again. The Graflex Mentor's done. And I have a bunch of sabers to build out. And in between commissions, I have a bunch of other cool sabers that I'm going to be working on. I've got the 0-button saber, you know, when that config comes out. And I've got I'm going to be doing, what was Cal's board? The Verso. I've got a saber that I'm going to be popping Verso in, and it's a fairly economic saber, so it'll be fairly cheap. When I say fairly cheap, I mean fairly cheap, not completely cheap. Less expensive than most of the other sabers that I'm producing. So there's stuff to keep your eye out on over the next year. You know, I have a lot of cool projects planned for the next year. I got to finish the Dark Sabers. One of those Dark Sabers is probably going to be up for sale, so I'll be doing those in between the commissions. And you know, there's a lot of projects to do. Cross guards. I've got some Taiwan sabers to build. I've got a lot of work to do, but we'll be taking on some commissions in between all that stuff. Yeah, Ethan's definitely come up with some innovative stuff. You know, if you can't say anything else about Ethan, is he's kind of on the cutting edge of some of the capabilities and some of the cool stuff he works out. You know, I'm not so sure why he has, you know, a bad reputation, but I like Ethan's work. I watch his videos. I watch what he does. I think he's still inspirational to me. He's still putting out some great stuff. An outdoor Meg video. I probably need to do an outdoor video here at the house. Probably take that the heavy duty blade out and whack some trees around here at the new place in the new backyard. We can do that. Last time I did an outdoor video, that didn't go so well. I was losing connection on my internet and everything else, but you know, who knows? The way I'm doing these now, it should be a lot more solid. I think it'll work. But well, that was a pretty full thing for tonight. But we're at 30 minutes. We've been on for an hour, so we're at 9:30, and I need to get on to life. But things are progressing. I'll keep you all up to date on where that Graflex is at. And yeah, it's sad. I mean, that's the sad state of the world that we're living in right now. You know, I don't even want to talk about that. But yeah, it's whacking trees. But, you know, I still think Ethan has a lot to contribute to the community. So I ignore the naysayers and kind of keep up with what he's doing. That's okay, Ron. If y'all missed the Mentor Graflex demo, go back and rewatch this video. All that stuff will be on there. And when I get the 2020 NeoPixels, I'll do a show about that. And I'm going to go ahead and order that crystal chamber motor so we can wire it up to a Profi and see what it does. I don't know. We'll see if my theory about the motor speeds and blade styles, if we run it as a blade, will work. And if that works, then that will work for a rumble motor as well. And I think that people could expand what they could do in Sabers. Now, with all that being said, I think that rumble motors are a gimmick that we don't need. And I think that a rumble motor would cause a lot of other problems. Yeah, I do think Ethan definitely makes you think outside the box. You know, he did an all-in-one chassis that worked for DV6, Graflex, and MPP that was pretty slick. And, you know, I thought it was ingenious how he did that. I thought it was really cool. I'm going to put my Graflex over here so I don't knock it off when I'm talking to you guys. But, you know, I was glad to see everybody tonight, and hopefully we'll have something for y'all next week, and I'm sure that we will. I'll conjure something up out of the thin air. But, you know, everybody be nice to one another. And whoop, gesture ignition was on the button. I want to throw something up into the chat for Birch, since Birch is here. And, you know, be nice to one another, support one another, help one another. That's always a great thing, to help each other out. And, yeah, you know, we've had my DV6 on a couple of live streams. My DV6 was my Profi 2.2 Beta Saber. And it's a great one. Yeah, I'm kind of like no rumble motors myself. It just, to me, it creates more problems than it fixes. But at any rate, you know, everybody support one another, help each other out. And Max, if you're still on, don't get frustrated. Keep charging. Try to reduce what you're trying to do in your Saber build, and you will eventually have success. And remember, fried boards and hurt feelings are all part of the game. It happens to me. It happens to everyone. It's just part of the game. Don't let it get you down. Keep charging. Keep trying. Keep building. You're going to get there. Yep. You can give me a call, Mike. I'll send you my number on Messenger, and you can give me a holler. But at any rate, thank you everybody for watching. May the force be with you, or the dark side, as it were.
Everybody for watching, as usual. I really appreciate y'all tuning in on my channel. And as always,